Hi everyone, welcome back. So I know it's been a while. Um, I was on a roll and then I kind of lagged behind, but now I am back. Okay, I don't know what that was, but let's go. So today I wanted to talk about Matthew Salis's book titled The 100-Year Flood. And this was published, let's see, I need to do more research before I start my videos. It seems like 2015, and Matthew Synopsis himself, he spent 10 years, so, a decade writing this. I think overall, this book is very poetic, it's very lyrical. Yeah, and this novel is more literary fiction than genre fiction or your generic fiction novel. And I think what distincts literary fiction from regular fiction is that it is more complex. I mean, not necessarily saying that it is somewhat better or worse than the overall generic fiction genre. It's just that a similar, I guess, a comparison that we can think about is a Starbucks coffee that you just get, regular cold brew, a regular black coffee, but then consider literary fiction as something that is, you just add a little bit more nutmeg or you add a little bit more cream. So there's more to the general plot than meets the eye. So literary fiction is definitely added metaphors, or I mean, it doesn't have to be just like a certain ingredient. It's just the way that it's written is not to be taken at first glance. I think one other example of a literary fiction novel recently is There by Tommy Orange. I think this novel, for me, I enjoyed because of all of the really weird, I will go more into it later, but I just really enjoyed reading it and the general, like, I imagine it being a really great novel to read out loud as well. Yeah, so, whoa. So the novel is mainly centered around three main characters. One, the protagonist, whose name is T. He's 22 years old. He's just about finished with college, but decides to take a gap year and goes to Prague to kind of go through this age of like self-discovery, I would say. And while in Prague, he meets the other two characters, Pavel Picasso and Pavel Picasso's wife, whose name is Katka. And these two names are like definitely not like unintentional, right? Patka Picasso is very similar to Pablo Picasso, and Katka is very similar to Kafka or Kafka. And then we also meet someone by the name of Rockefeller, and he's like an artist, the friend of the artist. And those are the only like few characters in the entire novel. Besides, like also T's mom and dad, but we also learn there's like a very complex narrative within that as well. So I actually first want to focus on the weird metaphors and similes that Celestis really kind of highlights, and I think does a really good job in describing very simple physical attributes, but in a very fun way. The first one is Rockefeller stood a thick 6'6", with cabbage-sized shoulders and a shock of brown hair like a toupee, which often displaced light fixtures. I think that's just like really funny because who describes shoulders as cabbage-sized? You know what I mean?
Toupee.
And also, I don't even know what a toupee. Oh, a toupee is a hairpiece or partial wig of a natural or synthetic hair worn to cover partial baldness. And I think that's just like, it's just so random. Like, is it fake? Is it not fake? I don't know. It's besides the point, but it's really funny. And then also throughout the novel, there are a lot of references to birds. And for example, there was one background story where Patka's like background in the arts as an artist, and Patka says, or in the novel it says, When he got out of the bathroom, his mother took his arm. Two men hovered in their living room like birds, sharp-beaked and feathered in plaid. "Please sit down," the first bird said, as if it were his house. He asked what Pavel's father was painting. So I don't really want to like share too much about like the plot because obviously like this novel is plot driven in a way, but I'm thinking just like focusing on this comparison of the person who is entering their house to a bird, and there's also a comparison of his hair poofed like a wet bird in another page of the text. Another, like, also some other excerpts that I want to share are, like, again, not trying to disclose too much of the plot. We look at this really cool line. Her words had splashed bright yellows and reds, then dark blues and grays. He had always known the dramatic moments of his life as paintings. I just thought that was so beautiful. The verb splashed and how words can have color. So, like bright yellows and reds or dark blues and grays. I think that was it was an interesting way of visualizing how verbiage is used. And then one last one that I wanted to highlight was this idea of adding this adjective swollen, but to the river, right? So a swollen river, without disclosing again too much of the plot, like, a swollen anything is just like overabundant and it's basically, like filling to the brim. So, in a sense, this is describing a flood. But I wanted to pick texts that stuck out to me as prose or just as lyrical inspiration for anyone that like just enjoys the beauty of descriptions. I think Matthew Solissis does a really good job with that here, and that's kind of just what I wanted to share as like the main thing that I took away from this novel. A lot of the praise for this novel is about like it's a new Asian American fiction writing, or like it it adds more in terms of like a diverse author because Matthew Solissis is a Korean adoptee, and so there's like this added dynamic of not only an immigrant but like what does it mean to be kind of like displaced from your cultural background. And while that rings true in this novel as well, because T is also a Korean adoptee sort, I don't think actually it is the main takeaway, or like it's not really emphasized, I think, or at least I wasn't interested in that through line as much. Yeah, so I would say in general, this novel really adds a lot of complexity to what we label as an Asian American novel, and it kind of dispels, or it really goes against the idea that the main character has to be from a certain culture or from a certain background to be, I guess, identified or labeled as the Korean American, because this individual T, he is so much more than just the generic, like, I don't know who I am because I, speak two languages kind of deal. Like, there's so much more in terms of like family issues, also like affairs, love interests, and it's not just like aspiring to be white as well, because there are racial disparities and certain topics that are touched upon, but it's not in the more like stereotypical or like traditional way, the ways that you kind of see them spelled out. And so I think it's rather unfair to label this novel as an Asian American novel, just because I think we're so beyond like labeling a novel just based on identity and like kind of flattening the characters as such. And I think that's what makes it interesting. Yeah, I hope that this novel, or I hope that this review gave you a little bit more insight of what to really look for in this novel. And I hope that like you enjoy it and pick up this piece as well. Matthew Solissis, it is his first novel, so I think he's come out with a few more recently. and he also writes a lot for like short stories and online magazines as well. And he's like I think he's like a professor, so yeah, he does a lot. And I think this is where I will end for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Um, I hope that this new year brings you a lot of joy. I know that I am definitely going to be planning for a better year than last year. I mean, the bar is set pretty low. So, yeah, thank you so much, and I hope to see you soon.